Hey, 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 Facebook. Monday Madness. Victoria Terrazzano here. It's late again in Melbourne, and we're here to talk about soy. I did mention last week that I'd be talking about soy this week. I think next week I'm going to talk about magnesium and some of the health benefits of magnesium. But in the meantime, I wanted to talk a little bit about soy because we give our children a soy protein based drink. And a lot of people have been talking lately about soy and hormones and danger and whether it's good or bad and whatever else. And to be honest, I'd never really looked into it. So I thought to myself, what I'll do is I'll go and I'll do a bit of research and I'll find out a little bit more about it. What I had seen initially, I had no concerns about. More and more vocal was coming up, and I thought, okay, I'll just double check that I haven't missed anything or learned anything different or whatever. So I went and did some more reviewing of the information available about soy. Now, I've got a couple of things to say, mostly not really about soy, to be honest. It's more about the process of the review that I went through. Hi, Beck, how you doing? And it's really about how we judge the interpretation or the information when we go out there and we do review stuff that's available, because, of course, the internet, huge minefield of good and bad information. And a lot of the information, when people say, oh, I've researched it and this is the case, more often than not, what they mean is, I've seen few blogs about it, I've read a few posts about it, and I believe. And it's very interesting to me the way people seem to confuse fact and opinion. So I wanted to say that when you are reviewing something or researching something or trying to find something out for yourself, there's a couple of tips that you need to go through when you're actually looking and receiving information. So one of them would be, do I trust this source? Now, it may be a particular person that maybe you've followed before, or you believe things that they've said before, or you know that stuff they've said is true and you do trust them. It might be a particular site that you think is appropriate. So, if you're looking for something about space and the information is coming from NASA, chances are it's probably okay. And little things like that. So I've come across a few things, and I have to be honest, this is just one of the articles on soy that I found. And I admit I printed it in quite big font because, it's easier to see and highlight and pick things up. But there was a lot of information out there about it. And more importantly, there was a lot of opinion about it, not necessarily information, and they are very different. Again, this is probably also basically opinion. So what I'm going to do is I'm probably not going to say, yes, soy is good, or no, soy isn't good or anything. I want to talk about some of the things that I kept in my mind when I was reading all the information and all the opinions that were out there. Okay, so one of the best things that I found that I was quite happy with was a thing by John Robbins called What About Soy? And that was an article that he put in, and it seems, when you're reading it, it seems to be quite balanced. There is a lot of reference to actual scientific studies and results from scientific studies. I admit I did not go and review all of them because, of course, again, when someone is quoting something in their papers or research or whatever, that quote is slightly taken out of context. So unless you've seen it in its original position, you're kind of trusting that the person writing down is actually getting it in the right context. So that's something to bear in mind as well. But yeah, the thing that I really came across, one of these things was, so there's an article by Sally Fallon and Mary G. Enig, which was titled Tragedy and Hype. Okay. Very interesting. Very interesting. One of the things they say is that the soy industry knows soy is poisonous and lies to the public to sell more soy. Okay. Now, I think that's a fairly extreme accusation. I also think it's pretty serious. And I think given the number of people consuming soy, if it's true, it needs to be really seriously looked into. I think one of the things that I feel when I'm looking into stuff about nutrition and health and food is that I am very aware, and I don't know if everyone else is as well, but I am very, very aware that there's a lot of politics goes on about, not even politics really, probably just money and greed and power, really. I'm very concerned about food labelling. I'm very concerned about what does and doesn't have to be in, and whether we all understand the labels and things like that. I was talking to someone the other day, and they were talking about the star rating that you get on things for health. It says 4.5 stars or 5 stars of health. And they were saying, actually, that's not saying it's good for you or it's bad for you. It's not even saying this is a healthy food or an unhealthy food. Because obviously, like Nutrigrain has got 4.5 stars or something in terms of health, and yet it's a ridiculous amount of processed sugar. So it can't possibly be that good for you. And yet there it is with its 4.5 stars. The 4.5 stars is actually a comparison of Nutrigrain against other cereals of the same type to say whether that is a healthier version or not than the others. It's not even to say it's a healthy food. And that's fine, except that consumers don't understand that that's what that's about. They think it's about something else. So they buy based on the big 4.5 stars of health rather than actually reading the tiny little details in the thing. And that's kind of interesting to me. It does compare like products and it is funded by the companies. You're absolutely right, Beck. And this is what I mean. There's such a wealth of misinformation out there, and a lot of it has to do with greed and money and just companies competing against each other for market share. It's not necessarily about genuine, honest facts. Okay. And I really do think fact and opinion do get confused so much. So some of the things that I wanted to talk about were a lot of the information about soy being bad for you. A lot of it relates or refers to studies of animals. They've done tests of soy in animals. And I'm back to, and I come back to this all the time, animals and humans are completely different. The way we process things is completely different. What we need in our systems is completely different. How we operate at a cellular level is completely different. Testing something on an animal is not really going to tell, even a close animal, it's not really going to tell you how that's going to relate to a human being. And I know it just from common sense, but also, obviously, I've been learning a lot more about different things for different customers. So I've recently had a customer talking to me about a thing called the MTHFR gene, which I didn't know a huge amount about, but it all has to do with, am I back? Did I disappear? Okay. It has to do with the body and its ability to process folic acid. Now, the interesting thing about folic acid is it's actually a man-made synthetic version of folate, which is naturally occurring in plants and several foods. The interesting thing about folic acid versus folate is that under certain spectrometers and looking at certain spectrographs and things, they actually look almost identical. And yet when you put them in the body, the way the body processes them is completely different. And it's because one is synthetic and one is natural. So there must be something in the way that when folate naturally occurs, maybe it occurs with other stuff that your body needs in order to process it or something. I don't know. But I do know that synthetic folic acid is not absorbed by your body the same way that folate is. And just little things like that make me think, well, surely there's other issues going on. You know, for someone to say, it was something that came up, you know, to say that it doesn't work well on the babies of rats or something, it's completely irrelevant, completely irrelevant. Rats are completely different to humans in how they process things. You know, cows respond differently because they have a different number of stomachs. Like digestion is completely different. It's not comparative. So when you are reading reviews and they're saying, oh, this has caused this in rats, or, you know, maybe bear in mind that that isn't necessarily relevant to how it's going to affect you. And when they say things like soy contains all these poisonous things that are going to blah, blah, blah. Did you know that in the pips of apples, now, see, I'm having a day now because I can't remember whether it's cyanide or arsenic, but there's a really bad thing that you're not supposed to eat. But you can eat the pip of an apple because you'd have to eat an awful lot of apples to get sick from it. But, you know, it's naturally occurring, it's fine. I'm back to that old wives' tale of everything in moderation. Like, it's not about not having any one thing. You know, from what I hear, cyanide and arsenic are quite good for you in small quantities, and some are even given for heart medication. But equally, they'll kill you, you know. What is important is variety, you know. You can live off a grape. There are scientific studies now that prove that grapes have, you know, everything you need. The old wives' tale of when someone's sick, take them a grape, was because grapes are easy to digest. They support the system when it's repairing, all that kind of thing. But you can't live off grapes forever, because you can't live off any one thing forever. If you only have broccoli in your life, you're probably still going to get sick. You know, we need a variety. We need lots of different things from lots of different areas in order to function. And soy is just one of many different things. And it has so many good things in it and so much stuff that if it's part of a healthy diet, I honestly, genuinely, from everything that I read, didn't see any reason not to take it. I know there's concern about hormones and people say, oh, it affects my hormones and blah, blah, blah. I think a lot of the problem now is that we're actually getting soy when we don't even know we're getting soy. Again, back to labeling and packaging, but there's a lot of, you know, things. I was reading the other day, some kale rice cracker things, you know, the little rice crackers you get. They've now done like kale crackers and beetroot crackers and stuff in the health food aisle that's supposedly good for you. And when you read the labeling, it talks an awful lot about vegetable oil. Interestingly, vegetable oil on the label often actually means soy oil or soy seed oil. And it's just interesting that they don't necessarily have to call everything what it is. And you may be consuming soy, which is in a lot of things, actually, a lot of things that you don't even know already in terms of processed foods or just general foods. Okay. So if you're consuming all that anyway, and then you decide to go vegetarian, so then you start eating tofu, taking soy milk, having soy margarine, that's a lot of soy in a day. That's, again, you're basically reliant on one thing, and we don't survive on one individual thing. Soy needs to be taken as part of a balanced and healthy diet, not as a one-off thing. I think my main takeaways from all of this were everything in moderation, and that you need a variety. That if you want to look into it yourself, I highly recommend you do, but there are things to bear in mind, which are, what is the validity of the source? If someone is quoting a scientific study, then maybe go and check the scientific study, because you can quote things out of context very easily. Remember in your head while you're reading things, particularly blogs, that it's only that person's opinion. It isn't necessarily a fact, unless, it states it was performed in a lab under certain circumstances. If they're telling you it's bad because it's bad for animals, I would take that with a pinch of salt and maybe just ask them where the evidence is of it being bad for humans. I mean, I know that there's been 30 plus years now you could buy soy formula for babies, and all the people that had soy formula as babies have not had, delayed development or poor hormones or, any of those things. So I think so far we're probably all right. If you want to know something, go to the source, like the actual scientific research. There's people say, I've researched this, and they don't actually mean research. They mean they've reviewed or they've looked at other people's stuff or whatever. They haven't actually gone into a lab and done research, Read the research, read the studies, if you're very interested in a particular subject. And then the other thing is that a lot of the people that we spoke to and things, we're back to really basic things, like if you're going to have soy, don't eat it all the time as the only part of your diet, have it as a supplement thing. Once it's been fermented or washed or mildly processed, there's no reason not to have soy in your diet. And actually, there's an awful lot of added benefits and a lot of studies and research showing how it promotes health, particularly in relation to cancer and things like that. So it's definitely worth reviewing seriously before you cut it from your diet just because of some scaremongering. And then there's the things of, obviously, if you're going to have it, as with everything else, we're much better off with organic versus, genetically modified. And this comes back to what I was saying earlier about the folic acid versus the folate. If a product comes as it was intended, your body can really break that down and sort it out. And we are amazingly smart. And as a society and just as a culture, we know so much stuff and we can analyze so much stuff. But we're clearly overlooking some things and we're jumping in a little bit ahead of our time. And sometimes just because we can do something doesn't necessarily mean that we should. And I think genetic modification of crops is maybe a little bit ahead of our actual full understanding. I mean, if we still can't get folic acid to the point where it can be absorbed by the body properly, then there's still work to be done in that field before it's all good. So we're back to the usual, organic's better where you can, and long-term organic or non-GMO is awesome. I mean, the issues that we're having around that are quite high. But again, you're back to, it's a lot of it's scaremongering, a lot of it's interesting labeling and politics. And I think we need to go back to the real basics. I really firmly believe in the old wives' tales. I think, there's a lot of scientific research out there now that is proving things that we've known for generations. This information has been passed down from grandmothers to mothers to children, and it was all done through observation of how people were behaving, how people were surviving. It wasn't, these are not accidental bits of knowledge. This is genuine stuff. So we know that we need to eat a balanced diet. We know we need to have variety in there. And we know that the more natural the food is, the better it is. So I hope that made sense to everybody. And I know I probably didn't answer the question about soy being a friend or a foe. For me, it's a friend in moderation because I think it easily forms part of a healthy diet. And I actually had a chili pepper tofu thing the other day from our JBT program, which was amazing. I've never had tofu before. Loved it. Totally going to do it again. Not every day, because it's not appropriate to do it every day, but certainly every once in a while. I hope you got some benefit from this or some value from this. And if you did, please feel free to share it and let everybody know. If you suddenly thought about it differently, or you thought, oh, actually, I was reading something the other day and I just believed every word without really thinking about it. That's the thing. When you read something, don't just accept it. Compare it to the information that you already have. Compare it to what you already know and ask yourself, does this actually make sense? Because that way you're less likely to, miss things that you don't need to miss out just because somebody said something. All right. Have a great week, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you all enjoyed it. We'll see you next week. Bye.